Hey, blessings Israel, shalom, 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 the saints of the Most High, straightway. I hope, well, glory to the King. Hope you're all doing well. This day finds you well, this evening finds you well and encouraged in the Most High. Hope you had a beautiful Shabbat. Again, thank you all for the audio check. Appreciate it. Good to see you in the room, all of you. Brother Ugly, Sister Nanette, Sister Green, Sister Salah, bless you, Brother Willie, Sister Diarra, bless you, Ziana, and Diane, Lisa, bless you all. Good to have you in the room tonight as others join in. Oh, Jesus, hallelujah. Man, just a few days away from the feast, huh? Boy, if you can't feel the excitement in the air, you just ain't Israel, right? Glory to the King. You know, yesterday Pastor gave us a wonderful message again, as always, a full plate, things that we definitely can stop and examine to see if any of these things be in us in any degree. And Yah is so faithful and merciful that He gives us this opportunity by reminding us of these things that we can actually get our hearts right. So I praise His holy name. I thank Him in the name of Jesus for this opportunity tonight to come before His people and to speak His truth. Tonight we're going to be talking about, I don't know if you all saw, Teacher Shane actually posted the title. It's my ongoing study of adultery for whatever reason. I've been, fairly immersed in studying about adultery. It seems like a cut and dry type of subject, but it's pretty vast, and it has a lot of depthness to it. There's a lot going on. Everyone knows that it's something that's totally, just totally wicked in the sight of the Most High. It's an abomination before Him, and that's evident if you all have to do is just read the book. But we're going to be going over some aspects of that tonight. We're going to be talking about its curses in some degree, not in entirety, and its judgments in some degree and not in its entirety, and the possibility of forgiveness. And believe me, everything you hear tonight is just coming directly out of the Word. I dare not put my own opinion or thoughts in there, and when I do, it's very rare. I would rather have the Word speak for itself. Again, there's going to be a lot of Word tonight. It's going to probably go hour and a half to 2 hours, so I pray your patience. Grab a pen, piece of paper, whatever. If you want to write down these scriptures and verses. And just to make you aware, Brother Ugly, I'm like in the context when I'm going to start out at, I might throw some other scriptures in the midst of it. I can't believe, what in the world are you calling me now? Oh my goodness. All right, glory to the King. But anyway, with that, we're going to get started. Again, thank you, Brother Ugly, for always being there faithful, for Israel, for taking care of these things. And I pray you all patience with me tonight as I try to get through this. This is a pretty good piece of study here. So we're going to start out in Numbers chapter 5. It's going to be the it's going to be from verse 12 all the way to the end of the chapter, which is verse 31. So verse 12 through 31. And it's remarkable that Pastor Dowell has been hitting on this, sitting on this particular chapter in a lot of different aspects over the few weeks. So I'm grateful for it because it's just telling me that it's in the spirit. Anyway, glory to the King. Give me 2 seconds here. I got to take care of something. Anyway, Numbers 5, verses 12 through 31, I think I said. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Oh, jeez. Never ceased to amaze me. Anyway, one distraction right off the gate. Glory to the King. All right, let's get started because we got a little bit of a night in front of us. So, anyway, Again, the title, Adultery, Its Curses, Judgment and Forgiveness. The whole account of the law of jealousy stems from a woman which was not able to conceive seed, a woman who is suffering the reproach of not having a child and seeks out another man to impregnate her. We can never be sure of her exact motives for doing such an act, especially faced with death if she is found out, but one thing must be certain: this woman is desperate. She may have been a woman who believes that her husband is the reason for her inability to conceive, and she in turn attempts to become pregnant through intercourse with another man. Or perhaps maybe she's a woman who is suffering from jealousy herself against a possible sister wife, as she cannot bear seed and seeks again the intercourse of another man to conceive child. And that's the thing that's never really spoken about when you think Numbers 5. What's the motivation? Why does this woman do it? And when we go look in more into it, we're going to find out that it's because, without saying it directly, indirectly, it proves that she was barren. And she was doing whatever she could to, outside in a state of desperation, to conceive seed. But that don't dismiss anybody or give anybody a pass, because it is a trespass and it is a sin. So let's go. Numbers 5, verse 12. Speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them, again, this is all in the King James Version. Speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them, if any man's wife go aside and commit a trespass against him, meaning that she forsakes her duties as his wife, she is duty bound to her husband under his covering. She came into an agreement, so she's going to step aside out of that. But the thing that she entered into, remember it said that she's under the law to be bound to her husband as long as he lives. So she's going to step aside and commit a trespass against him. That there's actually knowledge there, that this is actually an intentional purpose behind this. And a man lie with her carnally, and it be hid from the eyes of her husband, and be kept closed, and she be defiled, and there be no witness against her, neither she be taken with the man. A very interesting wording here. We're going to go over quickly what the word carnally means, because it actually, it really fills in the understanding of the whole of number 5 and the law of jealousy. Again, we're not going to be covering the aspect of the jealousy on the husband. We're going to be looking at the wife and her role and the reason for her adulterous act. The word carnally is the Hebrew 2233. This is the Brown Driver Briggs definition. Brown Driver Briggs. Again, Hebrews 2233. Zera is the Hebrew word. It means seed, sowing, offspring, a sowing. Seed, semen, viral. Offspring, descendants, posterity, children of moral quality. A practitioner of righteousness, figuratively. Sowing time. So you can see by the context of the word carnally that it means to sow seed. Now there's only 3 other places in the Old Testament where we find the word carnally being used, that being Leviticus 18:20, Leviticus 19:20, and of course Numbers 5:13, as we just read. In every instance where the word carnally is used, it is the same Hebrew word zerah, which we understand to mean sow seed. So there's something, the act of sowing seed. What is unusual about using the word carnally rather than just understand that adultery was merely an act of lust in every instance is that the translation uses specifically the word carnally to imply something more than or beyond acts of lust and passion. The implication appears to be more so centered on the intent of the act rather than the acts of lust or passion. And in the case of the man lying with a woman carnally, it was for the greater purpose of giving seed to a woman for the purpose of bearing children from a seemingly barren womb. So if you understand the context again, that and a man lie with her carnally, well, the reason he's lying with her carnally, he's lying with her to give her seed, to conceive. So when you see the word carnally, that's what it's talking about. That's the context of the explanation. Again, it goes beyond more than just acts of lust and passion. There's almost a purpose behind it. Because in Israel, obviously, what we know of and what we read, that it was a reproach, it was a shame for a woman not to be able to have a child and bear an heir for her husband, for her covering. Leviticus 18:20, Leviticus 19:20. These are the two verses. The other two besides Numbers 5:13 that we mentioned, I'm going to read them quickly just so you're aware of them. Leviticus 18:20. Moreover, thou shalt not lie carnally with a neighbor's wife, to defile thyself with her. And Leviticus 19:20. And whosoever lieth carnally with a woman that is a bondmaid, betrothed to an husband, and not at all redeemed, nor freedom given her, she shall be scourged. They shall not be put to death, because she was not free. There's a lot being spoken just in that verse, and that's not the context of tonight's topic, but there's a whole lot there. Okay, so why was there a need for a command with such wording as it says in Leviticus 18:20? Isn't adultery simply adultery across the board? Why this specific wording? It was already written in the Decalogue that thou shalt not commit adultery, and Israel had knowledge of this, so why the addendum to the command? Was it written in that particular way to establish that adultery under any circumstance was unacceptable, even to the degree of aiding a married woman in the conceiving of seed? So Yah put it in there because what I'm saying in my notes here as I'm reading is that we already had the understanding that thou shalt not commit adultery. And they knew that the act of committing adultery required stoning to death. If there's a key thing, I got to back up and mention. I can't believe I mentioned that. Forgot about that part. But anyway, there's is certain death. But why was this broken down into that specifics like that? That's what I'm trying to bring out, because there was something in a greater degree here, and that I believe it had to be written so people couldn't excuse it away that they were trying to just aid in giving seed. It is what it is. It was adultery, and it required death. But when you go back up into Numbers 5:13, something very interesting about this verse again, and said that, and if there be no witness against her, neither she be taken with the man. Again, everything had to do with witnesses in Israel, when especially in this Acts, like in the last blog talk I talked about John 8, and the premise was that the scribes and Pharisees that came up and threw this woman down and before Yeshua were false witnesses, and they would have been subject to their own judgment or to their own false witness and been stoned to death themselves, as thus saith the Torah when it comes to being caught in the act of adultery. But here there was no witnesses again, and that always goes hand in hand when you find these mortal sins, as I'll use that word, or these these crimes that bear the punishment of being stoned to death or burned to death or whatever the case may be. All right, Numbers 5:14. And the spirit of jealousy come upon him, and he be jealous of his wife, and she be defiled, or if the spirit of jealousy come upon him, and he be jealous of his wife, and she be not defiled. So you have two instances here. And it's kind of interesting. There's a huge lot of arguments that I'm going to just touch on later about this particular part about it, and it's actually blaming the man and making the husband guilty like he received a wicked spirit, but it's not the case. The fact is, it says that the spirit of jealousy came on him whether or not she committed the act or didn't, but you have to ask yourself, why would it come on him if she didn't? And there's no real sure answer behind that, but I do know that people put off a spiritual attitude when they're thinking about something, when they plan on acting on something, when their heart, it can actually, I don't know what the good word is. I have to be careful about the wording I use, but there's an actual atmosphere, something in the air, so to speak. And I believe that this jealousy, even though this woman may have not actually committed the physical act, the thought was already in her, intent was already in her heart, and that spirit of jealousy was allowed to, or did visit the husband, and he was, of course, for her sake, she didn't get busted at the end. She was free, but we'll get to that. Anyway, it's just a thought. All right, verse 15. Then shall the man bring his wife unto the priest, and he shall bring her offering for her, the 10th part of an ephah of barley meal. He shall pour no oil upon it, nor put frankincense therein. It's just going to be pure in its state, and there can be no mixture of anything added to it. For it is an offering of jealousy, an offering of memorial, which is a record, bringing iniquity to remembrance. And that means to marking or making a record of this perversity and mischief when you look behind that. Okay, now verse 18 refers to this offering as a, quote, jealousy offering. The offering was meant to bear record of the possibility of an act of perversity. It had to be proven yet or disproven. And I would venture to say this record was there to prove that the law of jealousies happened to this man concerning his wife, and if she be found guilty, the record will always bear record of her iniquity against her husband and against the Most High. And, of course, verse 23 actually, well, when we get to verse 23, finds the priest actually writing this record of these curses in a book. So this whole thing is definitely recorded for, let's say, posterity's sake, as a remembrance of what just happened here. All right, verse 16, and the priest shall bring her near and set her before Yahweh, and the priest shall take the holy water in an earthen vessel, and the dust that is in the floor of the tabernacle, and the priest shall take and put it in the water. And the priest shall set the woman before Yahweh and cover the woman's head, and put the offering of memorial in her hands, which is the jealousy offering, and the priest shall have in his hand the bitter water that causes the curse. So the woman is standing there, she's before the priest. The offering is put into her hands, right? She's actually physically touching it, as she has a connection with it now. And the priest shall charge her by an oath, and say unto the woman, if no man have lain with thee, and if thou hast not gone aside to uncleanliness with another, instead of thy husband, be thou free from this bitter water that causeth the curse. But if thou hast gone aside to another instead of thy husband, and if thou be defiled, and some man have lain with thee beside thine husband, and this is what's going to happen. So the priest is going to make the announcement about what will happen if she is guilty. Then the priest shall charge the woman with an oath of cursing, and the priest shall say unto the woman, Yahweh make thee a curse and an oath among thy people, when Yahweh doth make thy thigh to rot and thy belly to swell. I don't know if anybody's ever gone back and done the homework into looking behind what some of these particular words mean, but they are very implicating in what her punishment would be. The word thigh is used in verse 21, and the word belly. So the word thigh is the Hebrew 3409. This is in the Strong's, Brother Ugly, in the Strong's, 3409. Yari. Oh boy, I butchered that. Skipping through much of it. It means to be soft, the thigh from a fleshly softness. By euphemism, the generative parts relating to her capable of reproduction. So there's the attack is going to be centered on the reproductive areas. That's why it talks about the thigh to rot and thy belly to swell. And when you look behind the word belly in the same instance, the Hebrew 990, Hebrew 990, bet, it basically means especially the womb, the belly, or the bosom or body of anything. So we have a curse that goes from the womb itself all the way down a woman's reproductive organs. And that whole entire area, that's what this curse is designed, because that's the area where she get defiled in. And it's interesting that this water just, if she was guilty, just didn't kill her, but this is actually going to physically, if she's guilty, just wreak havoc on her body. I mean, instant havoc. Verse 22, and this water that causeth the curse shall go into thy bowels, and to make thy belly to swell and thy thigh to rot, and the woman shall say, Amen, amen. She's going to be in agreement with everything the priest just told her and instructed her. And the priest shall write these curses in a book, and shall blot them out with the bitter water. Now, when we read of the priest blotting out that which he had just wrote in the book, it was not that he wrote it down, then erased it with the bitter water, but the bitter water brushed over the words caused them to swell. If you ever put water on a piece of paper that you just written on, it causes what's ever written, especially in ink, to spread out, does it not? So you're actually seeing symbolically not only what's going to happen to her, but also in this book of memorial, that these words are actually going to swell or become spread out on the page. Remember in verse 21, the priest charged the woman with an oath of cursing, and it was her oath, her sworn testimony, if you will, which was placed in writing in the book. And for a better understanding how dire this whole situation was, the woman was made to repeat this oath 7 times. As we understand the word charged, as we find back in verse 21, if you look that up, and this verse meant to repeat the swearing oath 7 times. So 7 times she was charged or commanded to repeat this verse for all to hear. I've heard 7 is the number of completion. I'm not really sure why the number 7, but hey, glory to the King. I believe that if we look behind it, that's what it meant. Okay, in verse 24, continuing on. So up to this point, there's a test so far to see if she has committed or not committed adultery. We know the spirit of jealousy has come on the husband, and we know that there was no witnesses to catch her in the act. If there had, and she'd been doing it, none of this would have been necessary to take place, because everybody involved, the man and woman, would have been dead. So this is why we're going through this. But again, the context was the adultery that drove her to commit adultery was because she was seeking to lie with a man carnally to obtain seed that she might conceive. So she be not a reproach. And he shall cause the woman to drink the bitter water that causeth the curse, and the water that causeth the curse shall enter into her and become bitter. Then the priest shall take the jealousy offering out of the woman's hand, and shall wave it before Yahweh and offer it upon the altar. And the priest shall take a handful of the offering, even the memorial thereof, and burn it upon the altar, and afterward shall cause the woman to drink the water. And when he hath made her to drink the water, then it shall come to pass that, if she be defiled, and has done trespass against her husband, that the water that causeth the curse shall enter into her, and will become bitter, and her belly shall swell, remember that's her womb, and her thighs shall rot, that's her reproductive area, and the woman shall be a curse among her people. All right, so now some questions. So now, like I got my notes, now for the $1 million question. Was this woman put to death? If she was found guilty, or was she meant to live the remainder of her days as a defiled, cursed woman of great shame and contempt without the ability to ever conceive children? So far, the language doesn't mention death, but we know that upon witnesses, the guilty of adultery shall be put to death. But in this case, there were no direct witnesses, and she wasn't caught in the act. Only the pronouncement of the curse. She was actually busted through the whole ordeal here, the whole ritual, if I could use that purely, that has proved that she was guilty. The result of the guilty verdict was, of course, found in the reaction seen in the woman's body. 1, that her womb would swell, and 2, that her reproductive area leading to her womb would rot, which means it would fail, it would fall to cease, it would actually die when you look behind that. The question is then, did this judgment mean for her to go the remainder of her days with absolutely no hope of conception, as her whole reproductive childbearing system were useless and a constant reminder of her act of adultery, or was it the onset of what was supposed to kill her soon after after she ingested this and was found guilty, right? We don't know. The language doesn't tell us. But when it says that she shall be a curse among her people, my thinking is, now this is just my thinking, is that if she was put to death immediately, I mean, there might be a remembrance of her, but as long as she's in the land of the living, she is always going to be looked upon as something vile, as a symbol of what happens when you try to go behind Yah and go against His Torah. I mean, it's a living testimony against wickedness. I guess I can put it that way. Again, the language doesn't ever tell us if she was instantly taken out, if the bitter waters killed her, or what happened in her body, or don't know. It may eventually have been her death. I have no idea. But it's just, again, that's the language doesn't tell you whether she did eventually die because of that, or she just died of a regular living and just walk the earth as a curse. And if the woman be not defiled, but be clean, then she shall be free and shall conceive seed, meaning that the woman was not able to conceive prior to this judgment, but because she was proven to be clear of defilement, her womb was open to conception. There are actually some that argue that this whole ordeal was proof that abortion was allowed by Yahweh, and use this argument to justify killing the unborn. If you look into this, that's a fact. Under the idea that the bitter water was sort of a morning after pill that we use today, but what these losers fail to understand is that this woman had a womb which was barren, which could never conceive seed, and this whole judgment wasn't about killing an unborn child, but to judge her fidelity. Again. So, yeah, it's crazy it sounds. The argument is actually out there for this kind of crap, if you can believe that. But they use any type of, people have to use the word as their credibility to do anything that gives them some more substance, right? So if they can twist, warp, and distort it to their advantage, and we know about those that wrest the scriptures, that wrest in their own destruction, but they're going to try and put Yah into anything. They're going to pay an eternal wicked damnation price. All right, verse 29. This is the law of jealousies when a wife goes aside to another instead of her husband, and is defiled, meaning a wife that goes to another, lies with a man carnally and hopes to gain seed. Okay, but the point is that it tells you in verse 28 that the whole context of Numbers 5 about the law of jealousies, yeah, it has about the law of jealousies and the whole ordeal, but it also looks deeper than that about the woman who was barren, and she went and involved herself in a great wickedness in a desperation trying to produce a seed, right, for whatever her reason. Right? It could have been multiple things, like we spoke about as we started. Okay, verse 30, or when the spirit of jealousy come upon him, he be jealous over his wife, and shall set the woman before Yahweh, and the priest shall execute upon her all this law. Then shall the man be guiltless from his iniquity, and the woman shall bear her guilty. Oh my, help me, Jesus. And the woman shall bear her iniquity. Now, notice, the husband did not have to bring an offering for himself, but only the woman. Why was this? If he had been under the influence of an evil spirit of suspicion or accusation. Remember I mentioned that earlier. There are actually some out there, and you read in their commentaries that he was actually under the influence of a wicked spirit, and that's why they say in verse 31 that the man shall be guiltless from his iniquity. No, there was no bearing on him at all. He did nothing wrong. The spirit came upon him, the spirit of jealousy. He was doing that which one is in his lawful right. So why do these idiots think that he would be guilty of anything? I mean, the law was written that way, and it was reiterated in verse 31 that he shall be guiltless from his iniquity. Now, I do have to admit, when the first time that I went over this and I was reading this, I was so excited because I'm thinking, man, okay, is it talking about the man that she laid with? Wow, because this is like a real eye-opener, but, it wasn't the case. But we're still going to touch on that a little bit. All right, if the man to whom the woman sought for seed had no knowledge of her status, now we're going back to the man that lied carnally with this woman, or she did whatever and convinced him to do this act. If the man to whom the woman sought for seed had no knowledge of her status, meaning he didn't know that she was married, because adultery is defined in the status of the woman. And upon discovering that he was used by her, what would have been his judgment? Did these women masquerade as a harlot, much like Tamar did with Judah? We don't know. Question mark. She may have. We know that there was never a pronouncement of judgment against Judah for laying with a woman he perceived to be a harlot, but she wasn't of Israel. She was of another nation. We know that the wife of Numbers 5 sought out the man, and not the man went looking for a woman. It's in the language how it was written, to produce or offer seed to. So knowing it was her intent, how did she convince another that she wasn't married? I mean, think about it, because she's going. If you got some woman in Israel approach you, and if she made any gave you any knowledge at all that she was married, if you never met this woman, of course you being in Israel, like, well, hell no, I'm staying away from this because I know what this means. Back then it was a death sentence. So in my thinking, and nothing more than that, is that this woman masqueraded as something or deceived this man, because who would in the right mind enter into such a state knowing that if you're caught, it's your death, right? If you understand what I'm saying. But we're going to look at something here. Now, if this man was indeed innocent, meaning the one she laid with carnally, or laid with her carnally, indeed innocent, then would he have then fallen under the Torah command of sinning in ignorance? We're covering a few different aspects, all right? And I'm going to touch on something else here quickly after I get through here. Now, Leviticus chapter 4, verse 27 and 28. Leviticus chapter 4, 27, 28, like I said at the beginning, we're going to stay within the context of a certain chapter, and then, throw some other scriptures in there, kind of bring out a little bit more clarity, if you will. So Leviticus, help me, Jesus, that word is always troubling. I don't know why. Vayikra, chapter 4, verse 27 and 28, there you go. And if any one of the common people sin through ignorance, just the lady, just other, it's talking about those other than the priest. Now there's actually a different command for the priesthood or for Levi, and I didn't include that in here, but it is in there. You go look behind it when it has to do with the law of ignorance. But this is the common people. Now, if any one of the common people sins, so that's making the distinction, through ignorance, while he doeth it somewhat against any of the commandments of Yahweh concerning things which ought not to be done, and be guilty. So you think about it. Isn't thou shalt not commit adultery a command which ought not to be done? Obviously, thou shalt not commit adultery, right? So we have a situation here. It's a common person. He sins through ignorance. He doesn't have knowledge of what's going on. It's hidden from him. He doesn't know. But it makes clear there these things which ought not to be done, and he be guilty of breaking one of Yahweh's commandments. Or if his sin, which he has sinned, come to his knowledge, meaning also know by Yah, he come, whatever it may be. But we're sticking to Numbers 5 right now, concentrating a little bit on the man that was involved. Then he shall bring his offering, a kid of goats, a female with blemish for the sin which he has sinned. Again, there was no witnesses. They weren't caught in the act. This may have come out after. This woman was when this type of thing happened, and again, this ordeal is never recorded in Numbers 5, the law of jealousies. You don't ever read this actually being performed anywhere. But the fact is, if it was, you got to know that this thing just rippled through all the tribes, like a shock wave, because this is the stuff that sobers you up, right? And so this man would eventually got knowledge if he had been deceived that, oh my God, what in the hell just happened? I better go make this thing known. So it come to his knowledge. This is but we're talking about the law of ignorance, all right? What to do. All right, thinking about the childless condition of the woman, Numbers 5, and her desperation to not only raise up seed for her husband, but also her desperation to remove the stain of a barren womb, and knowing that she risked death if she was caught committing adultery to get seed, it would make the most sense that she did everything she could to make it appear as though she was not a married woman, and she would use that manner of approach in the seduction and manipulation of an unsuspecting man to get her desires, albeit whatever her thoughts, she is still guilty of whoredoms and adultery nonetheless. If this woman followed the approach of the adulterous woman in Proverbs 6, then this woman was on the hunt for a man. Much different story. Now we're trying to define the mind of the woman and her approach, and also the man that she laid with. Again, that's still the context here. We're still talking about adultery and lying carnally with somebody, right? It says in Proverbs 6:26 that the adulterous woman will hunt for the precious life of a man to lay with her. She's actually on the prowl. It doesn't say anything about her wanting to raise up seed, but again, there's an intent behind this. There's a purpose, right? This is a wicked woman. And of the man that lays with her, it says in verse 33, now we have a judgment here. So this may have been not something that the man was, it wasn't through the law or through the sin of ignorance, but this could have been his state, as we find in Proverbs chapter 6, that it says in verse 33 that this man, the one that went into this woman, this adulterous woman, this man will get a wound and dishonor, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. It doesn't say anything about getting killed or being put to death. But obviously he's going to suffer the fate of, even if he didn't know, that might be the context. We have two different dynamics here, and it's impossible to say which one is way, right? But it gives us two possibilities to draw from. But in the case I'm talking about now, if the man, in Proverbs 6, if this was the judgment, then he has to spend the rest of his life with a wound and dishonor, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. But in the case of Proverbs 6, it seems as though this woman was doing these things because of lust and not to become pregnant when you read it. Okay, one other thing we're going to say about Numbers 5, and we're going to move on, and I hope I'm making some kind of sense. I truly do. And when I do my blog talks, it is my hope that everything that's being spoken is clear, and that I don't get off in some college level type of discussion here. So what we got, and this is a clear evidence right now. We know about curses that pass down. Yah will visit the iniquity unto the children, the guilty of the third and fourth generation, and them that hate him, or that have sinned against him, or transgressed, or done something vile. Right? Well, obviously, the curse of barrenness can't be passed down. Barrenness really can't be a curse in perpetuity, because there's no offspring to carry the curse forward. If you understand, there's no descendants to a woman that was never able to give birth. So the line stops with her, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So we'll just leave that there. So I would have to say that any of the women that in the ministry or whatever that may be dealing with this, it's something, a condition from your time of birth up until the present. It has nothing to do with your ancestral line, because in what I see and what I can see, there's no way to pass that down, if it makes sense. All right, glory to the King. All right, going to Sirach chapter 23. Sirach chapter 23. That's Ecclesiasticus, verses 22 through 22 through 28. Sirach 22 through 28. Remember, I said this was about adultery, the curses, and the judgments, and quote, forgiveness. Okay. So now we're going to look at some of the curses that are going through as a result of an ancestral curse. All right. Sirach chapter 23, starting at verse 24. And, I'm starting at verse 22. Help me, Jesus. All right, verse 22. Thus shall it go also with a wife that leaveth her husband and bringeth in an heir by another. So you have a similar frame of reference or mindset of what was the thought of the woman in Numbers 5. Now we have a clearer picture here in Sirach 23:22 that her intent is, you have a wife that, remember in Numbers it says that she goes aside or abandons her covenant. But here it says she leaves her husband. It's the same wording, it's written a little bit different. Thus shall it go also with the wife that leaveth her husband and bringeth in an heir by another. So there's an intent, there's a purpose there. Right? She has a clear purpose. She wants to bring in an heir again, and she has whatever her motivations are. She's got a barren womb. She's feeling the lash or feeling the tongue of her sister wives, if the man has any, or feeling shame, the reproach, because it was a reproach not to be able to bear children for your husband. For first she hath disobeyed the law of the Most High, she committed adultery. And secondly, she hath trespassed against her own husband. She's defiled now because of what she did. And thirdly, she hath played the whore in adultery and brought children by another man. All right, this verse here, this one we just read, helps define for us why there's no mention of a spirit of jealousy involved, which made known that the wicked deed was done in secret. It's obvious why. The difference here, as opposed to that which number 5 dealt with, is that the woman in Sirach or Ecclesiasticus, this one we're talking about here, had already birthed the children. We're going to find that out. Or child or children, quote, plural children, unlike the woman in Numbers 5 who had not yet conceived a child. So we're still dealing with the same type of determination here on the part of a woman committing adultery, but in this case we're dealing with a woman that actually had conceived and birthed children. Okay, verse 24. She shall be brought out of the congregation. Obviously, it's the adulterous woman. She's been caught in some way, shape, or form. She's going to be brought out into the congregation, and inquisition shall be made of her children, which meaning that she is going to be questioning because of the children that she bore. And unlike Numbers 5 concerning the woman who sought another to conceive a child, we have no mention again of the spirit of jealousy, and this would make perfect sense, as in the situation in Numbers 5, the woman had not actually produced a child, unlike this account in Sirach, which makes it plain that the woman had already brought in children by another man. But like Numbers 5, we have a situation with a woman which went to another man to conceive in hopes of birthing a son who would become the heir of her husband's estate. What we also find out in Sirach is that this woman was brought out before the congregation, thus proving her trespass as an act of adultery against her husband. She was put on open display. What is more evident is that this woman was not punished by death for her adultery against her husband. It's just not in the language. It's not written here, but she may have been. But what is really interesting about this, and we're talking about generational curses, is that, and why was this inquisition? And an inquisition, is a very deep and deliberate probing without regard to anybody's privacy or care for that person. It's somebody there that is trying to uncover the facts, right? It's kind of like an interrogation. Why was this inquisition made of her children? Okay, as with all children, they carry the genetic traits in their physical person of both their biological father and their mother. And this would be the first real indicator that something is amiss, that this woman had committed adultery against her husband, as these children would not show the physical traits of the man that was purported to be their biological father. So when you read in the language that an inquisition shall be made of her children, she's going to be questioned on the physical appearance of her children, because they don't look like her husband that she's in this covenant relationship with, if that makes sense. So, and this is going to be another reason, another proof that she did go and actually commit, because she'd have been caught in the act, all this one that hadn't been written, because she would have just been put to death. But because she wasn't, she conceived, she had these children, birthed them, and then as the children go, it's like, hey, wait a minute, that does, hey, you birthed Billy, right? And Billy doesn't look like Daddy at all. Billy's nose is shorter or whatever, his eyes are bigger, whatever the case may be, but Billy don't look like Daddy. There's something going on here, right? And so in this case, this woman is going to start being questioned by the congregation or those in authority within the congregation, what is going on here. But here's the thing, Sirach 23:25, her children shall not take root. So because of this, and her children are living on this earth, right? And her branches, offspring and descendants, which her children shall not take root, and her branches, meaning her offspring and her descendants, shall bring forth no fruit. Again, her children and their generation will not be blessed, as she had committed adultery against her husband, and her punishment was a family line of fruitless human beings. Her children and their descendants shall be vagabonds. That means they shall take no root, not able to establish roots, and shall be cursed to wander this earth, never finding the sense of home and security or a sense of rest. Is this possibly a curse which some in Israel, maybe in the ministry here, may not have broken, a curse caused by a wicked woman from your ancestry that had brought in children by another man into that house? Is your life seemingly always resulting in a dead end? Like you can't never get ahead? There's always roadblocks. It's like one step forward and 4 steps back. You don't feel anchored. You don't feel satisfied. You got this impulse to jet all the time. It could be that somebody in your ancestral line committed adultery, this very thing in Sirach, and you might be the result of this. You might have carried down All right, if we understand, these things that they actually do carry down from one generation to the next. And without the knowledge to break this, this very well could be the situation. So there's some adulterous past in the possibility of those that, experience what I just described. All right, verse 26, Sirach 23:26. She shall leave her memory to be cursed, and her reproach shall not be blotted out. And they that remain shall know that there is nothing better than to fear Yahweh, and there is nothing sweeter than to take heed unto the commandments of Yahweh. It is a great glory to follow Yahweh, and to be seed of him is long life. So, again, we're dealing with this whole situation here. The aspect is adultery, but it's also the curses that can result from the seed that's born out of an adulterous relationship. So clearly, it's spelled out here. All right, so, and we're just going to go over this really quick, too, because if this is the case, and there's actually somebody that may be listening, will listen to this, or we know of somebody that is actually experienced this kind of vagabond lifestyle and never can get ahead, and it's like, just can't seem to be settled in themselves or anywhere, got this jet attitude. It could be that, again, like I said, it's somebody in their ancestral line, a woman that committed adultery, and this is the curse. But if you look in Leviticus 26:40 through 42, it actually talks about, and I'll read it quick. It says, if they shall confess their iniquity, now this is all part of speaking by the mouth and breaking these curses, right? And they shall confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers with their trespass, which they have trespassed against me, that they have walked contrary to me, and that I also have walked contrary to them, because if you go against Yah, he's like, hey, And I brought them into the land of their enemies, and if their uncircumcised hearts be humbled, and then they accept of the punishment of their iniquity, of themselves and their fathers, right? Then I will remember my covenant with Jacob, and also my covenant with Isaac, and also my covenant with Abraham will I remember, and I will remember the land. So this is a form of confession and a way to break loose from curses. All right, moving on. Like I said, I hope I'm not going too fast. I'm trying to keep it slow. But glory to the King. All right, we're going to finish out in 1 Corinthians. We're going to start out in chapter 4, verse 16, and we're going to end up in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 11. Now, let me stress something here. Whenever you go into your word and read your word, now remember, it's been said many times, and it needs to be said more, is because we've become accustomed to chapter and verse. But when these things are written as accounts, as a record, as epistles or letters, as in such we find in the renewed covenant, that there was none of these things didn't exist. It was a letter in its entirety. The writer may have put breaks in there, but the translators decided to go ahead and put them wherever they decided they wanted to put them, where it looked good. But what you need to learn to do is read it as one flowing letter, because when you do that, it actually brings a lot more substance and clarity about what's being said. Because there's somebody's pen to paper, they're trying to convey an understanding through pen and paper. They don't go, so far, and then all of a sudden the whole of the idea changes as it does with a chapter and verse, because subconsciously it's like you're reading and you come to an end of a chapter and it's like, well, this is a whole new day or a whole new page starting on the next chapter, which isn't the case. It's flowing. It's a continuous thought, especially when you read the writings of Paul. So I hope I'm making that clear, that when you do read, especially the letters or anything, try to remember, go before and then go after, and you'll see how many times it actually brings a little bit fullness to what you're reading. So, all right, starting out in 1 Corinthians chapter 4 at verse 16. Again, we're going to go through chapter 4, and then all of chapter 5, and then some of chapter 6. All right, glory to the King. All right, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 4:16, he says, this is Paul's words, wherefore I beseech you, be ye followers of me. So Paul is saying again, I beseech you, right? take notice. Be followers of me because Yah has raised me up. He has set me as the chief apostle. You know what manner of person I am. You better believe what I'm telling you. So follow me as the example, right? As I follow Yahshua. For this cause I have sent on you Timotheus, who is my beloved son, and faithful in Yahweh, who shall bring you into remembrance of my ways which be in Christ, as I teach everywhere in the church. Now some are puffed up as though I would not come. So Paul is instructing, he's telling him in the letter that when they receive the letter, they're going to know that Timothy is coming as well, and then he's eventually going to make his way there, but they're puffed up and prideful and arrogant that Paul's not going to make a show on the scene. Now, again, Paul is reminding the assembly at Corinth the example that he had already expressed and set before them to follow, and was sending Timothy to remind them all of the ways they are to follow. As it appears, the assembly there began to stray from those examples and admonitions and look to themselves and their own form of righteousness, which we will find out later was using the authority of the world to deal with matters pertaining to the assembly. So much of the context of a reading, even though, again, we're still talking about adultery tonight and its curses and its judgments and that sort of thing, again, what we're reading in 1 Corinthians, because if you put it all together, like I just mentioned, we're actually talking about even more so how to judge matters and how to deal with matters righteously, because Paul said, be followers of me. I'm reasserting this, telling you I'm going to send Timothy there to make sure the stuff is being carried out, to put you in remembrance what you already know, what you've already been discussed in your ears, okay? Because he's going to set this, because I teach the same thing in every assembly, Paul is saying. Yeah, remember the ways which be in Yahshua. So verse 19. But I will come to you shortly. Again, he said as though you were puffed up as though I would not come on you. But Paul goes on to say, but I will come to you shortly, if Yahweh will. Man, I'm making a beeline. I'm going to be there because I'm going to be right beside Timothy. We're going to set this stuff straight because there's some crap going on here that is going to stop right now. It's got to stop. I will come to you shortly, if Yahweh will, and you will know not the speech of them which are puffed up, but the power. So, verse 20, for the kingdom of Yah is not in word, but in power. What will ye? Shall I come unto you with a rod, or in love, or in the spirit of meekness? Now, Paul says, when I come, or when I will be coming, when I come to test the boast, to challenge the spirit of those who believe themselves to be something in the body, how do you want it to be, Corinth? How do you want me to come, is what he's saying. It's your choice. Paul is making it known that he will come to them in the way which they conduct themselves, the way they're ready to prepare to meet Paul. Are they going to receive Timothy's correction? Are they going to, when Timothy puts in remembrance before Paul's get there, are they going to start going back and remembering the examples that Paul already set before them, right? If you wish to remain, Paul is basically saying, if you wish to remain staunch, slack in your actions and deeds, prideful, heady, I will bring the rod, and that heavy rod of rebuke and correction. But if you change your ways, if you start acknowledging, right, that what you've done and the attitude and the spirit that you're in, right, and you stop behaving after the old man and seek for truth and righteousness and just judgment, then I'm going to come to you in the spirit of love and the spirit of meekness, but it's up to you. You know, but Paul could bring the hammer too. He was leaving it up to them, but what he let them know, I'm going to come there because there's a situation there that needs to be addressed, a serious situation. All right, going on to 1 Corinthians chapter 5. That was the end of 4. Now we're going into 5. See, we're going to try, and you'll see that it all flows together. So Paul, again in 4, he's making a known to them that he's going to come there. If Yah will, he's determined to get there. And it's up to you in what kind of manner he comes. All right, then he's going to send Timothy ahead of you, of himself, to remind them of where they're slack and where they've gone off the rails, so to speak, right? So in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, starting at verse 1, for this is the reason that Paul is going there. This is the reason that really got Paul's attention. It is reported commonly, wow, what a word, commonly, at this church at Corinth, that there is fornication, which we know to be whoredoms and sexual immoralities among you. I mean, it's reported commonly. I don't know who's sending these reports, but it's obviously being reported commonly. And such fornication as not so much as named among the Gentiles that one should have his father's wife. Understand the wording, and such fornication. Meaning, Paul is saying, he's describing that which is beyond crazy, right? I mean, which is beyond despicable, which is beyond deplorable and sickening. Meaning the sickest and wickedest forms of sexual immoralities, of those things that constitute the understanding of fornication. Paul is highlighting this one, man. This is such fornication that is so bad it shouldn't even be named among the Gentiles. And the reason is one should have his father's wife. So what happens when one has his father's wife? This man is committing adultery with his stepmother. So we have a clear case in 1 Corinthians 5:1, an instance of adultery taking place here. Some people call it incest. When you look through other people's commentaries, I guess you can call it that, but there was no connection between them bloodlines. I mean, talking about the son who was birthed by another mother and his stepmother. So to me, this more implies an adulterous act. Okay, and this is something that Paul said, this is such sexual immorality, such a sickness, such a despiteful thing that it's not even so the Gentiles don't even stoop to this kind of garbage, right? And this is the church of Christ. So here comes Paul going on to say in verse 2, and are you puffed up and have not rather mourned that he that hath done this deed might not be taken away from you? And Paul's all you can see him, man. You can see his passion, his anger, and his letters. Like, what in the world is going on here? It's no wonder he wants to get there. Man, he'd be on the first thing smoking, but whatever the God's will is, but he wants to get there, and he's going to deal with this stuff, but his letter's going to go before him, and he's going to let them know that this stuff is not going to stand. Paul's going to make this stuff straight, right? So he's saying, are you puffed up and have not rather mourned that the person that have done this deed, talking to the one that committed adultery with his stepmother, have done this deed might not be taken away from you? Where's the action? Where's the reaction for this sickness? Because this fornication, these whoredoms are commonly reported amongst you all, right? And it might have been within the body there, it might have been in the Gentiles around there, but this is an attitude and an atmosphere of that time, especially in that Roman and Greek culture, because that's stuff that, that was the spirit of these people, right? Like it is today. And Paul says, you are prideful and arrogant. You are puffed up. Of course, he left no room for discussion or doubt as to the condition of those at Corinth. Paul is saying that you as a body are thinking after the sorts of the natural man who walk in pride and arrogance of the unconverted nature instead of judging things righteously and pronouncing just sentences of punishment. Why, Corinth, are you not grieving that Satan is in your midst, working lasciviousness, you as an assembly, as a representative of the body of Christ? You all believe that you are not capable of doing such wickedness, and you carry yourself with your nose in the air, your way of shaming this transgressor through your I am better than you attitude because I'm not the one that did it. What happened to you, Corinth, that you have allowed yourself to stray from the examples that I have already set before you? How is it that you can witness and have such knowledge of such wickedness and look on such things and not act? Unlike the Gentiles who wouldn't tolerate such vileness, because it's not named once among the Gentiles, obviously they wouldn't tolerate this crap. Those things they commonly do among themselves and not be outraged at the hand of Satan infiltrating the assembly. There he is in the midst, right? And Paul is also thinking about it, though. Paul is also putting a shocker to the minds of the assembly at Corinth. He has to, because of their prideful, arrogant attitude which they've developed. It may have become because they believe that because they've come to the knowledge of the truth and they put themselves, of course we know that we're the head, not the tail, but they may have put themselves in a proud attitude because of that. But we know that they were definitely puffed up about this whole situation against towards this man that committed adultery with his stepmother. But Paul is guiding the assembly back into the right way of thinking, the ways that they have strayed from under the hand of those prideful and arrogant people, whoever they may have been, and whose authority comes in their speech, but not in the demonstration of the power and the authority of Jesus Christ, in the demonstration of purity and holiness and the sound representatives of the kingdom of Yah. Remember, that's what Paul said, you know, are you going to demonstrate your power in your speech or in the power of the kingdom of Yah? We're going to find out when we get there. We're going to see if you really truly are walking in the power of the Holy Spirit and His authority, or your mouths are just running. And he goes on to say in verse 3, for verily, as I am absent in the body, but present in spirit, Paul's already judged. I mean, he doesn't even have to be there. He already knows the state of the wickedness and the deplorability of this whole thing. I mean, it's got to be sickening to him to actually have to hear this stuff and to take Timothy and whatever Timothy is doing and send him in there to start cleaning up this stuff and start rebuking these people. And Paul, man, he's coming, right, like a freight train. For I, as absent in body but present in spirit, have already judged as though I were present concerning him that is so done. Paul doesn't even have to be there. He knows this level of vileness and wickedness is he's already judged it, right? As though I was there. I'm already telling you that this thing is going to be judged, okay? And he says in verse 4, he said, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, when you are gathered together in my spirit with the power of Yeshua HaMashiach, of course, in the name of Jesus and under his authority as well as under Paul's authority, when you are gathered together to execute this pending judgment as a body, all in agreement, perfectly joined in the same mind, with no division amongst you as a corporate body of believers. So when you're gathered together by his spirit, they know what Paul's spirit is, they know what it conveys, they know what he means in his representation of the ways of the Most High, his zeal for the Most High, right? Because he's already judged this deed as though he were present. So he's starting to gather their minds about what they need to do with these. He's already made them know that why is this wicked person still among you? Why is he still there, right? Why? What is he still doing there for? What are you people thinking? And then he goes on to verse 5. Okay, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, go back to verse 4. When you are gathered together in my spirit with the power of Jesus, so he's giving them command, he's giving them direction even before he gets there, right? To deliver such an one unto Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that the spirit may be saved in the day of Yeshua HaMashiach. So when he's talking about to deliver, that means to surrender, to yield up, to put in prison such an one. Such an one is this man that committed adultery with his stepmother, unto Satan for the destruction of, what's the primary purpose? For the destruction of this man's flesh. Why? That his spirit, what is the hope? That the spirit may be saved, that it may be protected, healed, preserved in the day of Yeshua HaMashiach. Paul is saying you need to turn this adulterer over to the God of this world, Satan, and let his own ways, this man's ways, condemn or convict him. Let him be surrounded again with the ways the Gentiles live, who despise holiness and righteousness and the purity of Yahweh. Let him see again what things will bring the masses to hell, what they're doing out there, these things that the Gentiles do. Let him see again for himself as a reminder of where he was brought from, where he was delivered, how he was given the privilege and honor and the call and being chosen to be in the kingdom of the Most High. What he was delivered from by living back in that cesspool of hell and wickedness. Again, the command was you put to separate this person out from you, right, that has done this evil deed. Turning the wicked over to Satan is a form of discipline, a form of chastisement, a form of re-education, if you will. Paul proclaimed this same sentence upon Hymenaeus and Alexander as he turned them both over to Satan by letting the world deal with them, that they may not learn to blaspheme the ways of Yahweh in speaking reproachfully, in speaking evil against others in the body, in vilifying the brothers and sisters in their puffed up, heady-minded selves. So this is something that Paul did as part of the assembly of his body of Christ. He turned people over to Satan. He turned them over, again, as a form of discipline, a form of chastisement, and a form of, again, like re-education, if you will. All right? If you are truly in Messiah and you are put away from the saints, you will feel the spiritual separation, and some will consider and amend their ways, but others will continue to justify their wickedness and allow their offenses to further destroy them, thusly fulfilling the words of John when he wrote that they went out from among us as they were not of us. When one is put out of the body, the assembly, he or she loses the protective benefits of the unity of that perfect agreement, of that spiritual protection is found within the assembly, and in doing so are then surrendered over to the unyielding and unmerciful barrage of Satan and his demons. I'm going to say something here, so I hope you all listen carefully, because there's a stuffing going on by a woman that used to be a member of this ministry in the body of Christ here named Victoria Hardwick, right? And I'm going to show you what blindness does and what offense does. Now, Victoria Hardwick was put out of the assembly because she, of her own accord, decided it was acceptable to separate herself from Shabbat fellowship. She just didn't show up. I don't know if that's mentioned anywhere. I don't think she ever brought that out in none of her videos, right? But that was the start of this stuff. I mean, the end of it. Let me put it like that. That offense. And she finally just started separating herself from Shabbat fellowship. To me, this is a sort of blasphemy against Yah, as it undermines His word as it pertains to forsaking the fellowship, and it misrepresents His kingdom among the Gentiles. Remember, Paul said, it should not be made so much among you, these things that you do, that the word of Yah is blasphemy among the Gentiles. And we have somebody that is breaking fellowship, such as the manner of some men. To me, this is a sort of blasphemy against Yah and His word. If this behavior would not have been addressed and sentence passed, this one sinner could have influenced more of the weak to forsake the gathering, as they also may have been dealing with offenses. Do you understand the context and the drive what Paul is talking about, putting this adulterer, this adulterous man, out of the assembly, out of the company of the saints? We see the same exact action here that happened here when Pastor Dowell put this on Victoria Hardwick. And if Victoria had truly understood, let me see, if this behavior would have not been addressed and sentenced passed, this one sinner could have influenced more of the weak to forsake the gathering, as they also may have been dealing with offenses, I already read. And if Victoria had truly understood that she was being turned over to Satan, without being said, she was actually turned over to Satan for the destruction of those false, offensive ways, for the destruction of those offenses, and fulfilled her 6-month separation, she would have been back in the assembly of the saints. We would have been good to our word. But we had to put this evil person away from us for this reason, because it infects the rest of the body. It sets a bad example in the body of Christ. It sounds harsh, but reading Paul's words, as we so far, Paul is preserving not only the person that is getting turned over to Satan, but more so even the body, that the stuff doesn't become like a cancer, if you understand. The Word tells us that Yah loves those who He chastens, and there's probably no greater form of chastisement than being cut off from the body of Christ and turned over to Satan for the destruction of those prideful, arrogant, offended ways, that the Spirit may be saved. In that hope, can Jesus save to the uttermost? Yes, but only if you keep yourself in the love of Yah. And what is so crucial in understanding of these actions by Paul is that he was making it clear that there is a possibility of redemption and forgiveness for such acts as adultery and blasphemy and others such wicked, at least the way that I read. And we're going to go on here, because that's why, in hopes that the Spirit may be saved in the day of judgment of Jesus. That's what he's in the day of Yahshua. The program was to separate the transgressors away from the saints, to show how serious allowing one uncorrected sinner to not bear the weight of the sin would affect the whole of the body. As Yahshua already reminded us that one sinner can destroy much good. Paul states that the hope is that the Spirit may be saved in the day of Jesus Christ, that day of judgment, but this hope can only come by the transgressors repenting of his or her sins. The day of Jesus Christ is the day when He comes to judge the righteous and the wicked, the day when He comes to separate the sheep from the goats, the wheat from the tares. The question then begs, again, can they be forgiven of these acts? Well, we clearly see the demonstration of here in what Paul did. Now, will they ever be allowed to come back in the body? I don't know. Paul really doesn't cover that. It would stand to reason that if Yeshua was going to forgive them and hear the repentance, if it's possible in the day of judgment, and their spirit would be saved, be delivered, I don't know. I really can't make that call, right? Because we know underneath the Torah that there was no ability for these people to repent. There was no sin offering for adultery or the other mortal sins as well. There was nothing available back then, so they went straight from life to death without any hope of repentance or redemption. But we see something in a greater measure here. At least that's how I read. And I can be standing corrected. All glory to the King. I'm trying to learn. So, going on to verse 6, Paul is going in expressing because of their lack of action or their inaction, this is what's going to happen. He is trying to convey to their minds because you didn't act. I don't know why you wouldn't act. You didn't put this wicked man out from you, out from amongst the body. He's going to go on to say what I just talked about in the situation with Victoria Hardwick and many others. He said in verse 6, your glorying is not good. You're boasting. Know you not that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. You allow that little blister, that big blister to remain, and it's going to end up spreading out. That's what Paul was trying to say. That's why he said you have to cut that leaven out, or that wicked one from amongst the body, right? So it doesn't leaven the rest. Your boasting, your mind, your perceptions and judgments are not good at all. This is Paul kind of trying to reflect on his mind. Your demonstration of a lack of authority and unity show that you are totally lost and without the knowledge to judge and handle things righteously. Can't you see that doing nothing about things like adultery and actually tolerating such wickedness will give Satan more of an atmosphere to operate in, such as he has among the heathens, because they have no idea what they're doing? Can't you see, are you also blind, that, such as you once were no longer supposed to be, that allowing such things to go unjudged and actually tolerated without consequences will lead others to believing that they will receive nothing more than a slap on the wrist? Paul is making a statement, right? This is making a harsh statement, a really harsh statement. But that's the extent, because under Torah you couldn't. Now we're dealing with Paul in this dispensation, and even though we know, we read in the last blog talk that stoning did happen, Paul is taking a different approach here. He's still on the approach of mercy, believe it or not, because it's in his own words. Can't you see? Are you also blind, such as you once were no longer supposed to be, that allowing such things to go unjudged, actually tolerated without consequences, will lead others to believing that they receive nothing more than a slap of the wrist? That's probably reading my notes. These ideas do not stem from me, meaning Paul, as I have already shown and taught you the ways in which you are to follow Yeshua as an example, and what he would have for his people, what his mind is towards his people, and how he expects them to walk in his image and demonstration of holiness, how he expects them to righteously represent the kingdom of Yah, and no longer tolerating works of the kingdom of Satan, the god of this world, to whom the Gentiles belong, and to whose image they are of. So verse 7, 1 Corinthians 5:7, he said, again, in verse 6, he said, know you not that a little leaven the whole lump? And he's talking in context, again, you have to keep in mind, of this adulterer and what just happened there. And he's bringing it home, right? And he said, okay, now you purge therefore the old leaven, that you may be a new lump as you are unleavened, for even Christ our Passover. And he's bringing it back into context of a deeper meaning, what it means of the Passover, giving them even a clear demonstration of having no spots in your Feast of Charity, if you understand what I'm talking about, because you have to put out them wicked ones. Therefore let us keep the feast not with the old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness. Now he's talking about either in the natural or in the spiritual, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Paul is drawing their attention back to the Passover, on how during this time we focus on our bodies to purge from ourselves anything that leavens us, puffs us up in wickedness, sin, and transgression. And if those things are left undealt with, they will also leave us on the outside looking in. Beautiful analogy how Paul is bringing this out. And so it goes with the body of Messiah. If we as a people do not take things serious and move to judgment against those forms of wickedness and vileness, those that can affect the spiritual health and well-being of the whole, such as Paul was trying to convey to the assembly of Corinth, we also stand in judgment of the rod of Yeshua. We as a body, for the sake and longevity of the body of Messiah, must purge out those which bring leaven in our midst when it is necessary to do so. So love your brothers and sisters enough to see when they are in wickedness, when they are going astray, that they don't end up in a place where they are outside the camp. And you can go back to Ezekiel, I believe it's 13 and 33, I don't remember much anymore, but where it talks about you see somebody in a wicked way, you don't want your blood, their blood to be on your hands, so you go to your brother, sister, and deal with that situation, and you're actually doing them a favor if they hear you from not being put out of the camp. And you might totally stop them from going even further in that wicked way. And Paul is going on again in verse 9, continuing on. I wrote unto you in an epistle not to company with fornicators. So Paul again is going back in and reminding them again, I already made this known, you're not supposed to company with fornicators, right? Those commit whoredoms, such as adultery and sexual immorality. I wrote this to you already, but yet here you are doing it, and it's commonly reported among you, right? I wrote, and I'm telling you why you need to act, because a little leaven, leaven to whole, it's going to infect the entirety of the body. And he goes on to say, yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetousness, or extortioners, or with idolaters, for then must ye needs go out of the world, right? But now I have written unto you not to keep company, if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator, one that commits whoredom, sexual immoralities, or one that is covetousness, which is somebody that is extremely greedy, or an idolater, or a railer, which is somebody that is very abusive, very mischievous, or a drunkard, or an extortioner, somebody that fleeces the people, that's a swindler, right? With such an one, know not to eat. So Paul is already saying that every one of these descriptives that I just read for you are all descriptions of a type of wicked leaven that can leaven the whole lump unless they're actually separated and put out from the body, right? Don't even eat with them. Don't even consider sitting down with them and eating. Okay, Paul gives for us just a sampling of those who are to be put out from the body and consequently turned over. Again, these are those, and if you carry through what Paul's mindset is, these are all those in this type of mind that should be turned over to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that the spirit may be saved in the day of Yeshua HaMashiach. So Paul gives for us a sampling, as we just read, fornicators, idolaters, railers, drunkards, and extortioners, who are to be put out from among the body and consequently turned over to Satan, just as Paul had done with Hymenaeus and Alexander, as we said earlier, as written in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 20. Paul wrote in his letter to Timothy, this is very important, that the reason that he turned those two men over to Satan, again, and it doesn't say for the destruction of the flesh, but the mindset is the same. There's a reason Paul is turning them over. That's the language he uses. He's turning these two men over to Satan that they would learn, right? The whole idea is that they would learn. If you read the language, he had to put them out there back in that atmosphere under the attacks of Satan so that they would learn. This isn't hopes. That's the hope that their spirit may be saved, that they actually may learn by their impending counters, what they're about ready to get put in the middle of, as being put out away from the saints, not to blaspheme, because that's what they were due. As turning them over, this form of discipline, they would learn by this discipline, would hopefully teach them that what not to do and how to repent and turn from this wickedness. That was what Paul's hope was. It's therefore evident by the example and direction that the Apostle Paul left for us that any time someone is to be put out of the body, it is to turn over to Satan for the destruction of their flesh. With that comes the hope of truly godly repentance and their turning away from those wicked ways. So here, Paul is making it so clear, right? Here, Brother Ugly got it posted up there for using the chat room. Yeah, of whom is Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have delivered unto Satan, that they may not learn to blaspheme. That's what it says in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 20, that they may learn to. That was the hope. They may learn that being delivered to Satan for the destruction of the flesh would teach them not to blaspheme. Teach them that this wicked way is not going to be tolerated in the body. All right? I hope I'm making myself clear. Oh, and I did have it written here, Brother Ugly. So, again, 1 Timothy 1:20, of whom is Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I delivered unto Satan, that they may learn not to blaspheme. If you look behind the word learn in that context is Paul is writing to Timothy. It means it's the Greek 38:11. That's in the Strong's. Greek 30:11. I'm not even going to pronounce it. It's from the Greek 38:16. It means to train up a child. That is to educate. By implication, to discipline. By punishment, chastisement, instruct, learn, teach. And if you go down to where it's taken from, the root from 38:16, it means as often beaten with impunity, or by knowledge, a girl, or generally a child, officially a slave or servant. So they're going to be turned over to Satan, become as a discipline, and they're going to become actually enslaved to Satan. Kind of what Paul is saying here, right? In that aspect, in that low of character. And so, what happens when somebody's in a root of slavery is that they've got none of their own volition. They have none of their own. They're desperate. They're the neediest of the needy. They come to a desperate state. And this is the only way sometimes that people can actually come to the realization of the wickedness that they're actually in. But it took an act. It took turning them over to Satan for the destruction of flesh. Again, I'm going to emphasize that the spirit may be saved. There's an act of redemption and forgiveness in them words. In the day of the coming God, Paul was a man of great mercy because he experienced, obviously, huge amounts of mercy by the hand of Jesus. All right, going back to 1 Corinthians 5, continuing on. For what have I to do to judge them that are without? And Paul saying, I got nothing to do with the Gentiles, right? I'm keeping this judgment. I'm keeping what's going on in this assembly right now of all these wicked ways. I need to focus on it because this is the body of Christ. What have I to do to judge them without? Do not ye judge them that are within. Now see how this flows together from chapter 4 through 5 and how it's talking about the whole thing that Paul said that he left an example. He sent Timothy there to put in remembrance what Paul's already said. He said he had already talked to you about this in epistle. He heard about all this fornication that's going on. He's telling them what they need to do as a body, as a corporate, to deal with this man that committed adultery and the list of these other ones we just named out, to separate them from you, to put this wicked person away, no one such eat. And then he's talking about judgment, right, and the importance of being able to judge these matters and how serious it is, right? So he's talking to them. He's just flowing from one thing to the next, but keeping it all grouped together as one specific point, if you follow what I'm saying. So he's going, what have I to do to judge them that are also without? Do you not judge them that are within? He's asking the question. Yeah, we should be looking at the body within because we're trying to keep a pure and holy house. But them that are without, Yah judge it. That's already up. The Gentiles, the heathen nations, the one that aren't born again, that's in Satan's kingdom. Them's the one Yah's already taken care of, right? He's going to deal with them in the day of judgment. Therefore, put away from you among yourselves that wicked person. That's the judgment, right? Paul's saying this is going on. Look at it, judge it, know what it is, You're the body of Christ. You represent Yah on this earth as his children, as his sons and daughters. This stuff is not to be tolerated. So the conclusion is, according to this judgment, that you put away from among yourselves that wicked person. And he just named some of who the wicked person were. Again, he said the fornicators, the covetousness, the idolaters, the railers, the drunkards, the extortioners. That's just a short list. But again, I mean, this was Paul's attitude back there, and the same thing he did with Hymenaeus and Alexander. Again, I know that it looks like we're getting off the context of the subject time, which is adultery and the curses and the judgment. That's what we're talking about now, the judgment part about it, right? And how this Paul judged this whole act. And, of course, and the possibility of forgiveness. Again, put away, separate those that are in wickedness away from the whole, turning them back over to the God of this world, that they may again come to the realization of those things that they were saved from, those things which after the carnal man who is after the ways of the flesh. Okay, and now we're going on to 1 Corinthians chapter 6:1, but forget the chapter and verse. This is just one letter. And then Paul's still talking about judgment, and he's reminding them again, dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to the law before the unjust and not before the saints? Didn't he just get done saying, didn't he just get done reiterating this letter, telling him, do you not judge them that are within? So now he's going to say, dare any of you having a matter against another? He is trying to pound into these people the importance of judging these things and nipping things in the bud, right? Having a matter against any, go to the law before the unjust and not before the saints, because he already said who's going to judge those that are without, and that's the Most High. That he ain't got nothing to do with them. He's just focusing on the body of Messiah. Again, Paul is asking a question, raising awareness in the minds of the people, asking them a common sense question, reminding the body of that which they already know the answer to, that they would hopefully keep things in-house and go before the saints. You can't drag matters that have to do with Yah's Torah out into a pagan world. That don't mix. Paul just made distinction that Yahweh judges those that are without, and who is to judge and settle matters within the body of Yahshua. We are. Paul tells the assembly that they need to judge them that are of the body of Messiah, as this is how all this mess started, because there was complete failure and breakdown on the part of the saints at Corinth to take immediate and necessary actions against the man who committed adultery with his stepmother. So this stuff just isn't going to walk away and just say, wipe your hands. Okay, well, we saw it, but hey, we didn't do it, so it's on you. You know it's a sin. You got to deal with Yah. No, this is a much more pronounced than this. There was a whole lot more action behind this and passion in making sure this stuff was set in order. And Paul goes on to say, do you not know that the saints shall judge the world? He's again reminding them in their place as saints. And if the world shall be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Again, Paul is digging in. He is laying it out there. He is hammering into these people the seriousness of judgment, and he's reminding them of their duties and what the saints will be doing in the kingdom, and that they must operate in that mindset right now on this earth. These blessings of Yahweh can be clearly manifest in his favor towards Straitway, in that we judge sin and wickedness. You can see Yah's hand of blessing ever since the inception of Straitway Ministries under the hand of our shepherd, Pastor Dowell, and by his same zeal and love and drive and determination to please the Most High and to not tolerate sin. That's one thing this ministry does not do, is tolerate sin. Unlike all the other everything else that you see out there, they have a great tolerance for it. In fact, they promote it. And that is one of the biggest reasons why Straitway is so blessed, is because we don't put up with this stuff, right? Clearly, it's there. The evidence is there. The fruit is there. Okay, verse 3. Know you not that you shall judge angels? Again, Paul is still... this, again, it stems from all this misjudgment or lack of judgment for the man that committed adultery with his stepmother. And he's pounding it. He doesn't ever want to forgive this stuff. And he hasn't even made it there yet. This is in a letter. Boy, he's softening him up so he can come in there in the spirit of love and meekness and not bring a rod, because I'm telling you, this sounds like a rod to me in these words. Holy crap. Anyway, know ye not that you shall judge angels? And he's reminding them what your place is. How much more things pertaining to this life, right? You are set. That you are the saints. You are the head. Do what your duty's supposed to do. Maintain each other. Be your brother's helper. Look at the situation. If you have judgments of things pertaining to this life, set them to judge who are least esteemed in the church. And I'm going to put my own personal opinion out here, and I'm going to tell you why in the next verse. But Paul has said, all right, I'll tell you what. We already know that you're supposed to pertain things to judging things in this life, because we already know you're going to be judging angels in the kingdom. So he's reminding them of their place, and not to go to the unjust, because there's nothing they can do. They don't represent Yah. And they can't do nothing about this man that committed adultery with his stepmother, right? But I actually believe personally, when I've read this and thought about and meditating, that Paul is actually making a jest towards the attitude of the assembly at Corinth when he instructed them to set the least esteemed to judge, which we will see who Paul is really speaking of when we say least esteemed. Okay, so in verse 6, Paul says, I speak to your shame. Is it so that there is not a wise man among you? So he's talking about those that are least esteemed being the wise men among them, right? The way he's saying in a mocking attitude is that these are the ones that the body there actually mock, right? They're the ones that actually turn their nose at, the ones that are the most wisest that can actually be there to teach the rest of them. These are the ones that should be set to judge, right? Is there not a wise man among you? No, not one that shall be able to judge between his brother. And of course that goes back to the Torah. Paul is making it known who the least esteemed are, but declaring that these are the wise men. Paul makes a jesting statement when he shows the assembly at Corinth in their prideful, haughty minds who they consider the least and refuse to listen to, who they put in the way background and elevate their own vanity above those who truly are wise and should be the ones who are sought out, heard, and their counsel followed. And this also follows perfectly in line with the mandates found in the Torah. One is written that if a men have a conflict, they are to bring it before the judges. And the Hebrew 81:99, the judges that are to pronounce sentences, to litigate, to rule. That's what judges means in the Torah. We understand our judges to be our body of elders who under the Torah had to be considered wise men. And this again should give a greater impact as to Paul's command to Timothy to go out and ordain elders in every city as where there was the body of believers in those places. So the elders ordained in all them cities were there for the reason, I think more so solely than anything, just to judge these conflicts that came up, to judge these matters. Again, they were considered wise men. The Torah proves that when Moshe was commanded to choose out men that were wise among you to be the judges or to be the elders in the whole of Israel. As it looks as though the assembly at Corinth had not yet had true elders placed over their assemblies, but only those who believed themselves to be somewhat when they were nothing. All right, that's where we're going to conclude the study. Yeah, I didn't go quite 2 hours, but I know it was a lot, and that was a lot of work. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate you all hanging in there. I truly hope that I was able to convey something in all of this from Numbers 5, from the reason the woman actually instigated the whole thing with the man, the possibility what the man's judgment one that she went laid with carnally, way up to Sirach with how these generational curses can come from, the seeds of adultery, and then finally the possibility, well, not only what has to happen in the body, and when it comes to judgment when people that do such wickedness as adultery, but also the hope that their soul may be saved and the spirit may be saved in the judgment in the day of Yeshua HaMashiach. It was a whole lot, but I truly hope that it made sense, as I always do. That's one thing I do not want to come. I always ask the Father, please help me to speak in such a way that anybody can understand. Really? Yeah, so hallelujah. So bless you all. Hey, we're going to be seeing a lot of your faces here in a few days. I mean, the saints are going to start pouring in tomorrow. And to all those that can't make it, we love you and we miss you. Especially all brothers in Canada, Brother Ugly and the saints up there, man. I know if you could get here, you'd be here before everybody else got here. But, y'all just keep the Passover with us. I know you will. Hey, who's ever traveling, Godspeed, and make sure you pray up before you hit the road. And you should always and any time. But as I conclude this study, always lift up prayers for the men of Yah, for our pastors, our shepherds, Pastor Dowell, Pastor Corey, those that have been put in leadership over you, that they may do righteously, that they may lead righteously, that they may never fall under deception or be clouded in their minds, especially when it comes to judgment, because that's a fearful thing. That's an absolute fearful thing to know that when it comes to judgment that, Yah is not, He's going to count all the judgments and on the basis of how they were judged. So that's a whole lot of eye-awakening things. So anyway, hey, bless you all. You all have a great week. Have a great feast on unleavened bread and the Passover. All right, much shalom.
Uh-oh, look at him looking.